Oh, hi. I didn't see you there. Recently I have, after a long hiatus, come back to the big boy, the OG, the Mac Daddy of role playing games. You know it. You love it. There's Dungeons and Dragons, right? I took a very extended break from the system after getting kind of disillusioned to a lot of aspects of it, feeling like my priorities as both a GM and as a player didn't really match with what the system was trying to do. But recently, my play group and I have gone back to the system, and I feel like I have a new appreciation for it. But like any gamer who likes anything, I also have a lot of things I don't like, and I'm going to complain very loudly about them. And I hope that you'll listen to me, and I hope that you will agree with me because it feels good to be agreed with when we complain about things. It feels good to be validated on the internet. And so really, if nothing else, that's the ethos of my whole YouTube channel is please agree with me. Or don't. Either way, yell at me in the comments and we'll get those engagement numbers up. Now, there's like 4 or 5 of these takes, my hottest takes, if you will, about D&D and the sort of culture around it, both as a GM and as a player. And some of them are very well informed, in my opinion, on my actual experiences and having played role playing games for a long time and just things that I've seen over the course of that time. Some of them are just things I feel. Just in my gut, my big breakfast sandwich filled gut, I just feel it. And, that's equally valid. I don't need to cite sources for my feelings. But just bear that in mind because some of these might come across as a little funny compared to the others. So let's start now. Is that cool? I feel like it should be. Let's just do it. Number 1. And this is something Wizards has already sort of started to address a little bit. You should play whatever race you want and get the abilities that you need. I don't like hearing players say, oh, I want to be a Leonin, but I'm going to be a rogue, so it probably makes more sense to be a half-elf. Dog, if you want to look like a lion person, take the +2 and the +1 that a half-elf gets. I don't care. Be who you want to be. If you want to be a dragonborn and you don't care about the things that they get, you want that human variant shit, get that human variant shit. It doesn't matter. Oh, but Dan, what if it unbalances the game? D&D is not a balanced game. D&D is insane. Brennan Lee Mulligan said it right, which is that once your characters get past level 5, they're kind of demigods. You can't really do anything to them. And so just let the human have a breath weapon. Who cares? It doesn't matter. It is something that I feel very strongly about as a player, but really more as a GM, that you shouldn't say no to a player unless you have a really good reason why. Because every time you say no to a player, you are training that player. You are training them to be less creative, to have less initiative, have less ideas. So if your player has a great idea or your player really wants to look a certain way or be a certain way, and the rules fuss with that, I am a huge, huge fan of saying, I don't care. Do what you want to do. The game's not going to break, or it's already broken, or it's perfect and we love rolling a lot of D6s. It's fine. Just don't worry about it. And that kind of leads like really well into the next point, which is much broader. And I think maybe the first point sort of falls under it in an umbrella sort of sense. Players' self-expression and their sort of creativity and the thing that the specific voice that they bring to the game should always take precedence over rules. Now, do I mean that if a player says, please, Mr. GM, can I please cast Fireball at a 9th level for a 1st level spell slot? Okay, use your best judgment here. But if a player proposes an interesting idea, if they have a creative solution to a problem that you hadn't considered, even if it skirts around the very cool dungeon that you spent time building, you should probably not say no to that unless you have a very good reason to. There are so many times that I have seen players propose kind of wild, wacky things, a variety of acrobatics or, really flavorful combat stuff. For instance, this is something I saw recently. Somebody wanted to do a little backflip before they stabbed a monster. They weren't asking for more damage. They weren't asking for advantage on the roll. They were just asking if they could do a little backflip and stab somebody for flavor. And the GM had them make an acrobatics check, which they then failed and fell on their face and didn't get an attack. what's fun about that? Who feels good about that? Certainly not me. Would the rules suggest that that person needs to roll an acrobatics check to do a cool flip? Yeah, I guess so. But did it have any mechanical impact outside of that? No. So I feel like let the person do a flip. Flavor is great. Making your characters feel cool, making your players feel like they're freaking sick nasty with it is great. Do that more. Be liberal with that, I feel, in my opinion. I mean, if you're trying to run a grimdark campaign, I would first say that you probably shouldn't play 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons, but if you are doing that and you want that sort of hyper gritty stuff, then yeah, maybe you want to pull back on this. But for the type of D&D that I want to play and the type of players and the type of play that I want to encourage, I'm going to say yes to that every single time. And no, there's not going to be an acrobatics roll unless you are trying to gain some sort of actual advantage. So now that I've probably alienated myself a little bit, let's alienate myself a lot. Legendary resistances suck. They're boring. They are definitionally arbitrary barriers to make boss fights longer and seem more difficult because the boss can just go, no. Now, I am not an expert in designing encounters, but there has to be something more creative that we can do as designers of encounters that is more interesting than just saying, actually, he's a super mega super lich, so it doesn't hurt him. It feels like kids with action figures. Like maybe instead of a legendary resistance, you have a different layer action, or you expand on their legendary actions. Legendary actions, I think, are great, especially layer actions. But the idea that you can look at your players and just say, no, that doesn't work because he big strong is, I don't know. It just kind of sucks to me. I guess it sort of feels like it pulls from the sort of anime trope of big explosion on a guy and then the smoke clears and he's standing there and they're all surprised, even though it's season 7 and you've seen this happen 1,000 times. How could you possibly think the first explosion would kill him? Goku, please get a grip and also like go spend some time with your family. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not going to harp on this too long because ultimately my points remain the same. But to me, legendary resistances just feel very boring, very plain, very arbitrary. And I feel like there is enough boring, arbitrary shit in the bones of D&D 5e already. Let's maybe not do more of that. Let's find more creative solutions, more interactable elements for players to struggle with. Yeah, I think that's reasonable. And now, I feel like with the things that I've been saying, it's very easy to look at me and say like, Dan, you're going to make your players overpowered. To which I would counter, yes. That's the point. Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition is a superhero game. You become immortally powerful very quickly. Now, you can run smaller scale campaigns. You can keep levels below 5 if you want. I feel like you are trying to fit a square in a circle peg there, and you should just play like an OSR game like White Hack or Worlds Without Number, which is fantastic and free. Check that out if you haven't, because, you know, one thing I'll say is that I don't want to sit here and posture like I'm some know-it-all smart guy. A lot of people don't know that some of these RPGs exist, that there are other options beyond 5th edition because of how prevalent it is, because of how readily available content for it is. It's so natural to assume that it's the only role-playing system that is worth playing or that it's the very best. And it is quite good, but it's good at specific things and bad at others. For instance, D&D is not built at all for like narrative roleplay. It doesn't really get in the way of it too much, but it doesn't have any tools for it. It doesn't reward you at all. Inspiration is fine, but like, you know, you can only get inspiration so many times before you realize that that advantage is probably not going to be used in a narrative way. It's probably going to be used in combat. So that said, if you are running a campaign in 5e and you feel like your players are overpowered and you feel like there's nothing you can do to put the fear of God in them, I would say, yeah, that's the point of this system. It's a power fantasy, and that's a lot of fun. Have fun with that. And if you don't like that, then check out some of those OSR games I mentioned, because let me tell you, having 2 hit points really does a number on how strong you feel in the world. Yeah, being overpowered is fun. Let your players be overpowered. You're supposed to be a fan of them as the GM. You're supposed to be not their friend necessarily, but you're supposed to root for them, I feel. But I feel like I see far too many GMs or see too many like memes or stories about being aggravated that players are overpowered. And, you know, I understand that designing combat encounters is hard in 5th edition. It is possible to do, no matter how high level your characters get. Like, Dimension 20, Brennan Lee Mulligan is an expert in combat encounters. They always seem to get fairly tense, even if Revivify kind of takes the wind out of those sails. But to me, the main strength of 5e is about making you feel like a juiced Chad wizard boy. And, you know, I would hope that your GM would be stoked as you do your juiced Chad wizard boy nonsense, rather than disappointed that it didn't take you 2 more rounds and that his boss didn't get to knock one of you unconscious or kill one of you. So yeah, that's maybe the hottest take I have. I'm sure a lot of people are going to disagree with that, and I'm eager to hear, because as much as I like to meme that I want everyone to agree with me, I certainly don't think that my point of view is the only one that is true. I would love to hear from you. Now, the last one is silly, and this is really the main one that is like, it's just a feeling I have in my chest. And maybe it's just because I'm a bitter ex-Druid player, but let Druids fly. You know, can we let Druids fly? Why do we have to make them wait to get a fly speed? Dog, if I can turn into a bird, I can fly. What are you talking about? Aarakocra fly from level 1. Air Genasi, I think, fly from level 1. Let me fly. Boots of these ones, you know, the ones that fly, the winged ones, uncommon. I'm a druid, man. Let me fly and swim and such. You know, I don't really know what the argument is against that. Feel free to tell me, enlighten me. Maybe there's something huge I'm missing in terms of like incongruity, but like trying to explain to a player, yes, you can turn into a bird, but you can't fly yet. You haven't quite figured that out. Yes, you are like a demigod in terms of power. You can turn into all these different animals and cast all these spells. You haven't quite figured out locomotion yet, though. You're gonna have to spend, you know, a few more centuries training that before you fully get it. I don't know, man. It just kind of sucks. Yeah, those are it, I think. I mean, I'm sure I have a lot more and will have a lot more as I play more. But I'm curious what you guys think. I'm curious what bothers you most about D&D as a system. Because as a combat system, it's a ton of fun. It gives characters a ton of options. It gives players a lot of different ways to express themselves through those things. It is quite combat-centric, which is my main criticism of it. Being somebody who really enjoys the dungeon worlds of the world. Maybe a weird sentence there, but the more narrative RPGs, you know, I'm very fortunate that my play group does narrative sort of as second nature and doesn't really need the tools that something like a dungeon world would provide. But if I was introducing someone to roleplay and they were getting into it mainly for the storytelling of it all, I would not start with 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, because to quote the great Ross Bryant, Dungeons & Dragons invites you to play a wonderful game of adventure and sword and sorcery, but first you have to fill out this W-2 really quickly, and that really can take the wind out of people's sails. Some people that are weird like me get excited looking at a big sheet with a bunch of spaces in it and like, ooh, look at all the things I can put there. But most normal people look at that and shudder, and I can't blame them for that. So getting able to hand someone a sheet that is just done pretty much already is kind of nice. Anyway, I'm rambling now, but that's my piece. I set it into a microphone that's expensive behind a Dungeon Master screen that is almost 10 years old. So I have credibility, and listen to the... It's even into a dice tray. I mean, come on. I'm a credible source, you know? I don't know. This is a weird energy that I have here, but I feel good about it. I feel good about it. And that's all I'm going to say on the matter. And I think that finally brings us to the end of this video. I want to thank you so much for sitting down and listening to me ramble for the better part of 20 minutes. You could have done that with really anybody on the internet, and for some reason you chose to do it with me, which I think is really special and really cool. If you want to see more stuff like this, consider subscribing. I have a Patreon too, if you just have money that you need to be parted with and you want to give it to a guy who looks like this. You know, it's worth considering, I think. Maybe I have a vested interest, but I think that would be a great decision. My friends and I are working on a podcast called We Like the Idea. Go check it out. We play games together. We make fun of each other. And we spend way too much time world building and talking about the logistics of that. And it's a lot of fun. I think I might do some content on that in the future. But anyway, I'm Daniel. This is my room, and it's messy. And this desk is also kind of messy. Look at what I'm hiding here. That might have broke. It's fine. And, I love you more than I love Dungeons & Dragons. That's an easy one. I'll see you next week.